Let's watch Ayanna Pressley try to corner Ben Carson with gotcha questions and moral grandstanding. And Carson, he doesn't take the bait.
The gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Presley, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Over here. Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Carson and I have waited a long time for this moment, but the residents of my district, the 7th Congressional in Massachusetts, have been waiting far longer for your agency to do its job. Colleagues across the aisle earlier were critical of the passion and even the outrage that we've expressed on this side of the aisle. I'd make no apologies for that. This matter is very, very personal. Let me be clear, housing is a fundamental human right, and the displacement of families should be regarded as the public health crisis that it is. Mr. Secretary, your pioneering work in pediatric neurology is historic, and it is something to be commended. And so it pains me that your gifted hands and mind are doing the bidding and carrying the water of what I believe to be one of the most morally bankrupt presidents in our nation's history, increasing rents, evicting families. You mentioned that the operating room was a safe haven away from all the troubles of the world. Safe haven, that's exactly what a home should be and what every single person, and in particular our children, deserve. Today, you are not here as a doctor or even as our Surgeon General, which I think might be better suited for your talents, but as the official tasked with leading the agency overseeing our nation's crumbling housing stock. And for that, I do believe you are unqualified. You said this was not a political matter, but it does seem that political views are being played out in the policies that are being rolled out every single day. When you imply that people are living in public housing either because of a desire to be self-sufficient, questioning a work ethic, when we are eliminating a stock but not increasing supply, people in the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District would have to work 84 hours to afford a decent one-bedroom at fair market rent. Doris Bunty, who's a former Massachusetts state representative in my district and was the first African-American woman to hold the position of head of BHA, the first public housing tenant to lead a public housing agency in a major city. She said being poor is not a character flaw. I agree. But again, given your medical background, perhaps you could weigh in on the health consequences of failing to invest in safe housing. Mr. Secretary, since I am short on time here, yes or no, is stable and safe housing a social determinant of health?
Sounds like you have not been here and heard most of my testimony.
Please just answer the question, reclaiming my time. Yes or no, is stable and safe housing a social determinant of health?
There is no question that housing is an important part of health.
Yes or no?
No question that it's a part of health.
It is well documented that health problems such as lead poisoning, asthma, and injuries from trips and falls, especially amongst our senior population, can be linked to substandard housing conditions. Combined, these conditions result in billions a year in healthcare costs. Many of those most at risk of developing these conditions reside in public and federally assisted housing. Yes or no? If left unaddressed, do you believe the substandard public housing conditions pose a risk to tenants' physical, mental, and emotional health? If left unaddressed.
Yes or no? Can you ask me some questions yourself?
You don't get to dictate what my line of questioning is, reclaiming my time. You're a very smart man, so you understand the question. Please answer it. Yes or no, if left unaddressed, which I believe they are unaddressed because this budget does not reflect the need, do you believe the substandard public housing conditions pose a risk to tenants' physical, mental, and emotional health?
You already know the answer to that.
Yes or no?
You know the answer.
Yes or no? I know the answer. Do you know the answer? Yes or no?
Reclaiming my time.
You don't get to do that.
Oh.
The time belongs to the gentlelady.
The evidence is clear that if we do not invest the necessary funds today, we will pay the price in people's health tomorrow. And what is this administration's response? Cuts. Cuts to crucial funding like the Public Housing Operating Fund and the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, Section 202 housing for elderly and Section 811, housing for persons with disabilities, and even the complete elimination of the Public Housing Capital Fund. These policies are devoid of empathy and humanity, and you've been talking in the abstract, but I want to get specific. There's a Miss Northcross, a mother and a grandmother living in Brighton in my district. She's raised her children and now cares for her grandchildren in property with thick mold on the walls. Her son was recently hospitalized, look at the pictures here, because of bone tumors in his arm and leg. He needs surgery to save and improve his quality of life, but he won't get it because the family must have a sanitary, stable housing condition first. Their actual home literally poses a risk of post-op injury and infection. Her question to you is, what do they become? When you raise children in these conditions, what can they become? So yes or no? Do Ms. Norcross and her family deserve to live in these conditions because they are poor?
If you've listened to any...
Yes or no, do
that I
they
have
deserve to live in
say,
these conditions because they are
you
poor?
know very well...
Would you let your grandmother live in public housing?
You know very well...
Would you let your
my
grandmother
view
live in
on
public
this.
housing, yes or no?
You know very well...
Under your watch and at your helm, would you allow your grandmother to live in public housing under these conditions?
It would be very nice if you would stop acting...
You've stated that
The
your partner...
gentleman from Florida, Mr. Lawson, is recognized.
All right, now that you've seen that exchange, let's break down what really just happened, because there's a lot more going on here than just a tense back and forth. Ayanna Pressley came into that hearing with a very clear strategy: dominate the moment emotionally, control the narrative, and force Ben Carson into a corner with yes or no questions designed to trap him. You heard it over and over, yes or no, reclaiming my time, cutting him off, not allowing nuance, not allowing explanation. That's not oversight, that's performance. And look, nobody is denying that housing matters. Carson didn't deny it either. In fact, he explicitly acknowledged that housing plays a role in health outcomes, but Pressley wasn't interested in having a real discussion about policy trade-offs, budget constraints, or long-term solutions. She wanted a viral moment. She wanted a headline. And most importantly, she wanted to tie Carson directly to what she called a morally bankrupt administration, a clear shot at Donald Trump. That's the bigger picture here. This wasn't really about housing policy, it was about politics. It was about framing Republicans as heartless and Democrats as compassionate, regardless of the actual complexity of the issue. Because here's what's missing from Pressley's argument. She talks about funding cuts like they exist in a vacuum. But where's the conversation about efficiency? Where's the accountability for how existing housing funds are used? Where's the discussion about local governance failures, bureaucratic waste, or policies that actually trap people in dependency rather than help them move forward? Those questions never get asked. Instead, it's all framed as, if you don't spend more money, you don't care. That's not serious policymaking, that's ideological framing. And then there's the way Carson was treated. This is a man with a world-renowned background in medicine, someone who has literally saved lives, being told he unqualified to lead a federal agency, not because of incompetence but because he doesn't align politically. That's the subtext. Disagree with the agenda, and suddenly your credentials don't matter. Now let's talk about Carson's approach, because it's easy to miss if you're just watching the surface-level tension. He refused to play along with the theatrics. He didn't get pulled into the emotional escalation, he didn't snap back, he didn't turn it into a shouting match. And that matters because in moments like this, the goal from the other side is often to provoke a reaction, something they can clip, spin, and push out. Carson stayed measured. And that frustrated Pressley, you could hear it. The more he resisted the forced yes or no framing, the more aggressive the questioning became. But here's the reality. Complex issues don't have simple yes or no answers. Housing policy is tied to economics, zoning laws, local governance, federal budgets, private sector incentives. It's a web of factors. Reducing that to rapid-fire moral questions might sound powerful, but it doesn't solve anything. And then we get to the emotional centerpiece of her argument, the story about a struggling family living in poor conditions. And look, those situations are real, they matter, they should be addressed. But using individual cases as political leverage while ignoring systemic inefficiencies doesn't fix the problem either. Because if the system is broken and clearly parts of it are, then throwing more money into the same structure without reform just repeats the cycle. That's the part you're not hearing in speeches like this. And this is where the broader ideological divide comes into focus. On one side, you have a belief that government spending is the primary solution, that more funding equals better outcomes. On the other side, there's a push for structural reform, accountability, and policies that encourage upward mobility rather than long-term dependency. That clash is what you just witnessed. Not just a disagreement over housing, but a fundamental disagreement over how problems should be solved in the first place. And honestly, moments like this are why people are so frustrated with Washington. Because instead of real dialogue, you get scripted confrontations. Instead of problem solving, you get political theater. Instead of collaboration, you get soundbites. So the question is, who actually benefits from that? Not the families struggling with housing. Not the communities dealing with these issues every day. The only people who benefit are the politicians who get to walk away with a clip that reinforces their narrative. That's it. If you watched that exchange closely, you saw two completely different approaches, one focused on optics, the other on restraint. And whether you agree with Carson or not, one thing is clear: he wasn't there to perform. He was there to avoid being turned into a prop. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think this was real accountability or just political theater? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like if you made it this far, and subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this, because we're not just watching these moments, we're actually unpacking what's really going on behind them.